Greetings, my beloved family and friends. This is your brother, Dr. Henry M. Carter, wishing you a day full of peace and prosperity. I hope all things are going as you planned it. I hope you're planning your work and working your plan. I'm coming here today to you all, man, just to say, stop and reflect. Stop and reflect. You know, today I just got incapacitated. I got stopped in my tracks because all of a sudden I started to think about all of the people in my life that has transitioned on to be with the ancestors. It's as if all of them just start calling out my name at once, and then their faces start flashing in my mind, and I start thinking about how they poured into my life, each and every one of them. I thought about my grandmother, Jimmy, and how she used to sit me down and make me put together 500-piece puzzles. And she'd tell me we have to start with the corners and build in. And then she told me to look at the picture on the box and start matching the location on the puzzle. And every evening I spent with her, I had to spend some quality time putting the puzzle together. I was reflecting on those times we spent together, and I realized that my grandmother making me put together 500-piece puzzles, which was teaching me critical thinking skills. She was teaching me how to be patient. She was teaching me how to be humble. And at the time, I didn't know why she had me putting together these 500-piece puzzles. I got very good at putting together puzzles. I got very good at critical thinking. And then she would have me to do these word find books and where you have to look for the words forward and backwards and diagonal and all of that, right? That was building my critical thinking skills. And then I started reflecting on my mother who passed away. And she died when I was 22 years old. I'm 58 years old now. And I started reflecting on, the quality time I spent with my mother. I think we have to stop and start reflecting on the things that people have done for us who have transitioned. I reflect on my grandfather, the late Reverend B.C. Carter Jr., and how I had the opportunity to spend 3.5 quality years with my grandfather before he transitioned, and how by his example and his words, I was being molded. Because he was a sharp dresser. He dressed sharp all the time. Even when he wore blue jeans, he wore some suspenders and a shirt and a hat and some dress shoes. And I learned proper dress. I learned wisdom. I learned spirituality from my watching and listening to my grandfather. I think about my aunts who have transitioned. My aunt Virginia, and how she was the youngest of all of my mother's siblings, and how she was that aunt that became the surrogate mother for me and my siblings when my mother transitioned, and that she watched over us and protected us and guided us. I think about my Aunt Esther, who we used to love to go to her house for Christmas. She lived in Hammond, Indiana, and she made, at that time when I ate meat, some of the most delicious tacos that you could put your tongue on. I think about my Aunt Lou, who recently passed away, and her entrepreneur spirit, her out-of-the-box spirit. I think about my Aunt Marion, who had an impeccable work ethic and how she would be in tune with her spiritual essence. I think about my Uncle Curtis, who was the deacon at my grandfather's church, who was a pillar of his community, who wasn't afraid to stand up and speak out. I think about my Uncle Grady, who was a laid-back gentleman, cool as ice. He was a Snoop Dogg before Snoop Dogg was a Snoop Dogg. You see, we have to think about and stop and reflect on the people who have touched our lives, the people who have poured into us, who have made a difference in our lives, who have transitioned on, you see? And sometimes when I'm driving, those spirits of those who have transitioned on come and they engulf me, and I feel their essence, and I feel their energy. And my mind is flooded with the things that they have done for us. And I think we need to constantly remember those. In Africa, they call it libations, where you have water in a glass and you pour the water to the ground, because water represents life and the earth gives birth to us. And we pour the water to the ground and we say out the names of the ancestors who have transitioned, because we want them to be remembered in this realm as they have transitioned over to the next realm. And I just wanted you to think about those who have transitioned, because there are so many people whose name is not ever called out again once they have transitioned. I think about my grandmother, Moselle, and her wonderful, wonderful gift of cooking. Oh, that woman could cook. She could make some blackberry pie, some blueberry pie, some peach cobbler, some pound cake. She could cook. That woman could cook. And she was a church lady. I'm talking about an old school church lady with the hats and the dress and the high heels. And she lived up the street from the church that my grandfather built, that she was the first lady in. And she would stroll right up down Hunt's Line. That was the era where the church was. And my grandmother would stroll down Hunt's Line, and she could have easily got a ride. Now, somebody could give my grandmother a ride, but that ain't what Moselle wanted. Moselle wanted you to see her hat. She wanted you to see her dress. She wanted you to see her shoes. And she would wave, and then she'd get to the church, and she'd get happy. She had this happy routine. She'd say, "Have mercy, have mercy." She'd stand up, and then she'd sit on down. That's my grandmother, Moselle Carter. There are so many I could call, so many who have transitioned on, that we have to be grateful that they paved the way for us. And I want you to stop and reflect on somebody who was in your life that transitioned on, and I want you to thank them for what they have done. This is your beloved brother, Dr. Henry M. Carter. Say I see all of y'all at the top, because the bottom is way too crowded. Peace.